In October 2019, the peaceful life of the cities of Cape Coral and Fort Myers in Florida was disrupted by a series of violent crimes that shocked the local community. The main person involved in this criminal case was Wade Wilson, a young man with a long history of offenses. Within a few days, Wilson committed 2 murders and a brutal attack. His victims were 35-year-old Christine Melton, 43-year-old Diana Ruiz, and his ex-girlfriend Melissa Montanez. These crimes not only took the lives of 2 women, but also deeply affected their families and the entire community. This story reveals the details of Wade Wilson's life, the circumstances of his crimes, and the investigation and trial process. It also highlights the lives of the victims and the impact of these tragic events on their loved ones. The main characters in this case are Wade Wilson, the criminal responsible for the murders and assault; Christine Melton, the first murder victim Diana Ruiz, the second murder victim Melissa Montanez; Wilson's ex-girlfriend and victim of the attack, Stephen Testaska; Wade Wilson's biological father, Cape Coral, and Fort Myers police officers, families and friends of the victims. This narrative is based solely on the facts provided by primary sources and is intended to present a complete picture of the events leading up to Wade Wilson's arrest and conviction. Wade Wilson was born around 1994 to teenagers who were not ready for parenthood. His biological parents, whose names have not been disclosed, were too young and immature to raise a child. Wade's father was only 14 or 15 years old and his mother was a year younger. Realizing that they were unable to provide adequate care for the child, Wade's biological parents decided to give him up for adoption. A couple from their church, Candy and Steve Wilson, agreed to take the boy into their family. At that time, the Wilsons already had 2 daughters. From an early age, Wade demonstrated problematic behavior. As a teenager, he began to break the law, and this quickly escalated into a pattern of criminal activity. Starting in 2010, when Wade was about 16 years old, he regularly came to the attention of law enforcement. Between 2010 and October 2019, Wade Wilson was arrested more than 20 times. He was charged with a variety of crimes, including theft, fraud, disorderly conduct, and assault. These offenses reflected a growing trend of violent and antisocial behavior. Wilson had served multiple prison sentences for his crimes. In particular, shortly before the events of October 2019, he spent more than 3 months in prison. However, these punishments do not appear to have had a significant impact on his behavior and have not deterred him from further offenses. Wade was also violent in his relationships with women. According to his former girlfriends, he regularly resorted to physical and psychological violence. Wilson beat his partners, raped them, and threatened to kill them. His ex-girlfriends described him as a monster who could manipulate and pretend to be a nice guy only to abuse them later. 6 months before the tragic events of October 2019, Wade resumed a relationship with 23-year-old Melissa Montanez. Despite his violent behavior, Melissa continued to give him chances. She endured beatings and betrayals, hoping that his assurances of love were sincere. Wilson often justified his aggressive behavior with drug use and mental illness, and Melissa wanted to believe that he could change. Even when Wade was in prison, Melissa waited for him and was ready to try again after his release. However, over time, she began to realize that Wade's attractive exterior hid an emptiness and that her own life could be in danger because of this relationship. Wade's biological father, Stephen Testaska, tried to keep in touch with his son after the adoption, despite his problems with the law. Stephen often gave Wade money, neglecting his own needs. He became Wade's go-to person in times of need, especially when he was running from the police or in need of financial assistance. This complex backstory of Wade Wilson provides a context for understanding the events that followed and his actions in October 2019. It demonstrates a long-term pattern of violent behavior and disregard for the law that ultimately led to tragic consequences for several innocent victims. Evening of October 6, 2019. On Sunday, October 6, 2019, the temperature in Fort Myers, Florida, was a seasonally warm 84 degrees Fahrenheit, about 29 degrees Celsius. Wade Wilson and his girlfriend Melissa Montanez decided to spend the evening at Buddha Bar in Cape Coral. They arrived in a stylish gray 2015 Dodge Hellcat that belonged to Melissa. However, the evening did not go smoothly. According to the police report, a heated argument ensued between Wade and Melissa. Wade wanted to leave the bar and go to someone's house, but Melissa flatly refused. Annoyed, Wade said he needed to get something from his car and went outside. A few minutes later, Melissa also came out and saw her Hellcat pulling out of the parking lot. Surprisingly, she didn't see Wade behind the wheel. Melissa realized that Wade had abandoned her. Finding herself without transportation and unwilling to return home, she contacted her friend Amy, who came to pick her up and take her to her place. Exhausted from the events of the evening, Melissa quickly fell asleep. After leaving the Buddha bar, Wade Wilson met 35-year-old Christine Melton. They quickly hit it off and left the bar with Christine's friends. The company continued the fun at the home of their new friend Jason, where passion arose between Wade and Christine. Christine Melton was described by her family as a real ray of sunshine that warmed everyone around her. She was a loving daughter, sister, friend, and beloved aunt to her nephews. Christine genuinely cared about her loved ones and was always ready to help. She was considered the glue that held her large family together. Born in Illinois, Christine showed a bright creative nature from an early age. She was fond of painting, dancing, singing, and dreamed of becoming a famous actress. However, it was simple earthly joys that made her life meaningful. At school, she made friends with Stephanie, with whom she carried her friendship through the years. The girls moved together to sunny Cape Coral, Florida, where they got a job as waitresses at Duffy's Bar. Christine loved her job because it allowed her to interact with people every day and share the warmth of her heart. In her free time, she loved to experiment with her appearance, trying bold looks. Christine was fascinated by aesthetics and dreamed of opening her own beauty salon. She attended makeup and manicure courses, improving her skills. When the company broke up in the early morning hours of October 7th, Christine's friend Stephanie was calm about leaving her with Wade because she hadn't noticed any warning signs, and Christine herself assured her that everything was fine. However, Wade took advantage of the sleeping girl's defenselessness to strangle her, wrap her in a sheet, and try to sneak her out. But the stiffened corpse was too heavy, so the killer simply left it in the house, stole the victim's phone and car, and disappeared. Wade's next victim was 43-year-old Diana Ruiz. She was on her way to her morning shift at the Moose Lodge when Wilson picked her up, pretending to be lost. As soon as Diana got into the car, he immediately attacked her, strangling her on the move. Then, in a deserted area, he dragged the still-living woman out of the car and ran her over several times until her body was a bloody mess. Leaving her mutilated remains in the bushes, the killer drove away. Diana Ruiz was the embodiment of a mother's love, care, and devotion to her family. This slender woman with long dark hair and a gentle smile devoted her life to the two most precious people, her teenage daughter and 5-year-old son. They were the meaning of her existence, for whom Diana spared no effort, time, or emotional warmth. Diana was born and raised in Cape Coral in a close-knit Cuban family. From an early age, she was surrounded by the love of her parents, who instilled in her the values of unity, mutual assistance, and the joy of communication. The girl grew up active and sociable, easily made friends, and was the life of the party. At the same time, Diana showed great responsibility and determination, dreaming of a decent education and profession. Fate gave Diana true female happiness, 2 wonderful children and a loving husband. Her daughter inherited her mother's beauty and gentle nature, and her son inherited her lust for life and spontaneity. Diana was proud of her children above all else, and made every effort to raise them to be decent people. She supported them in all their endeavors, rejoiced in every success, and consoled them in their troubles. To ensure a decent future for her children, Diana worked hard. For the last 5 years, she was a regular bartender at the local Moose Lodge Club, which became her second home. She adored her job because it allowed her to interact with many people every day, making them feel good and being recharged by their positive attitude. At 8 a.m. on October 7th, Melissa woke up to find that Wade had tried to contact her several times from an unknown number. When she finally answered, Wade's voice sounded loud and fierce, demanding to meet immediately. Feeling uneasy about his history of violence and drug use, Melissa agreed to meet publicly at her workplace. She asked her friend Amy to accompany her for support and safety, and Amy agreed. As soon as Wade pulled up to the meeting place, Melissa realized something was wrong because she didn't recognize the car he was driving. It was a gray Dodge Hellcat stolen from the murdered Christine Melton. Wade immediately started a scandal, demanding that Melissa get into the car. She refused, so Wade began to force her into the car. Wilson was so eager to attack his girlfriend that he forgot to put the car in park, and it rolled forward and hit another car. He then jumped out and attacked Melissa with a furious rage. Despite her desperate resistance, the burly Wade quickly overpowered the fragile girl. He punched her in the face until she bled, bit her ear, grabbed her by the throat, and pushed her against the wall, threatening to kill her. And all this happened in broad daylight in front of people. Fortunately, passers-by intervened. Someone called the police. This allowed Melissa to escape from the clutches of the sadist. She ran away, leaving her attacker with nothing. Then the crazed Wilson jumped back into the stolen Hellcat and fled. An ambulance took Melissa away, battered, with scratches and a split lip. These events were crucial to the subsequent investigation and arrest of Wade Wilson. On the morning of October 7th, shortly after Wade Wilson's attack on Melissa Montanez, Fort Myers police arrived at the scene of the incident near the Mila Spa. There, they found a battered Melissa, who described in detail the attack by her ex-boyfriend and indicated that he had fled in a black Nissan Versa. The victim also described Wade's history of violence and drug addiction and expressed fear that if he had managed to get her into the car, he would have killed her for sure. According to her, he repeatedly threatened to execute her during the attack. At the same time, Cape Coral police received a report of the suspicious death of 35-year-old Christine Melton at her home on Tudor Drive. At the scene, they found the body of a strangled woman in a sheet, bound with her own clothes, as well as signs of a struggle and the disappearance of the victim's car. The gruesome discovery prompted the cops to classify the case as a murder. During her testimony, Wade's ex-girlfriend Melissa recalled that in the morning, he had called her from a number that belonged to a Christine Melton from Cape Coral. This clue led investigators to suspect a link between the attack on Melissa and Christine's murder. While some law enforcement officers were looking for traces of Wade Wilson, others began to identify him by interviewing friends and relatives. Soon, the suspect's biological father, Stephen Testaska, got in touch. He said that he had received several disturbing calls from his son, who confessed to killing 2 people and begged for help to escape. Fort Myers police officer Tim McCormick received information about Melissa's beating and spotted a car and driver matching Wade's description in the parking lot of Joe's Crab Shack. To ensure a coordinated response and his own safety, Officer McCormick quickly called for backup. However, Wade managed to escape, driving more than 6 miles from Fort Myers to a business on Hancock Bridge Parkway in Cape Coral. In desperation, Wade turned to Josh, a businessman he knew through a previous employer. He begged for money for a bus ticket out of town. When Josh refused, Wade said in a state of agitation, "No, you don't understand, Josh. I killed people last night." A stunned Josh went outside and immediately called the police, while Wilson hid somewhere in the backyard. Police quickly arrived at the scene, but were unable to immediately locate Wade. During the search, Cape Coral police learned that Wade was also wanted by Fort Myers police for the assault on Melissa. Cape Coral officers set up a perimeter and conducted a thorough search, but Wade remained elusive. While the Cape Coral police were dealing with Wade's escape, they were notified of another urgent situation nearby. Authorities announced a search for 43-year-old mother of 2, Diana Ruiz. Beloved by the community, Diana was reported missing around 4 p.m. after failing to show up for her morning shift at the local Moose Lodge. Her purse was later found abandoned along the road. Investigations into Diana's disappearance pointed to possible criminal activity, prompting authorities to classify her as missing and endangered. A black 2019 Nissan Versa was spotted between 10:15 and 11:15 a.m., traveling eastbound near the location where Diana was last seen. That evening, authorities got the breakthrough they had been hoping for. The detective had previously contacted Wade's biological father and asked him to notify police if Wade called. During the court hearing, Wade's father spoke candidly about what had happened. Wade called his father around 10 p.m. During this call, Wade described in detail the murders of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz. He described how he had strangled both women with his bare hands, simply because he felt like it while high. He described how he met the girl in a bar, went to her house, and then strangled her in her sleep. As for Diana Ruiz, Wade said he saw her walking down the street, offered her a ride, and then strangled her in the car. When he tried to get rid of her body, he found that she was still breathing, so he ran her over several times with the car. Wade's father was shocked by these horrific revelations. At first, he wanted to protect his son from punishment, but eventually he realized that Wade was no longer the child he loved. The killer had already done the damage and was ready to destroy further, so Stephen made the difficult but right decision to turn Wade into the police before he could ruin other lives. With a heavy heart, the father found out where his son was hiding and sent the authorities there under the pretext of calling a taxi. Wade hid in the house of a married couple who had just left town. Agents from the U.S. Marshal Service and the Regional Fugitive Task Force contacted Wade, and after approximately 30 minutes of loud verbal orders to leave the house, he opened the front door, where agents arrested him without incident. Wade was taken to the Cape Coral Police Department for processing and later to the Lee County Jail. According to a report published online on October 15, 2019, and written by Caitlin Greenackle, Wade's ex-girlfriend Melissa claimed that Wade called her from jail the previous day and confessed to the murders of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz, whose bodies were found in a field behind a Sam's Club on October 10th. He confessed to me on the phone that he killed both of these women. He strangled them both. He said he just felt it. He said he was on drugs and it messed him up, Melissa explained. The arrest was the culmination of an intense investigation that brought together several law enforcement agencies and led to the arrest of a dangerous criminal responsible for the brutal murders of two innocent women. Approximately 6 weeks after the deaths of Christine and Diane, the state's attorney's office organized a press conference to make an important announcement regarding the case against Wade Wilson. State's attorney Amira Fox spoke alongside Cape Coral Police Chief Dave Newland and teams from both agencies. Fox announced that a Lee County grand jury had met that day and had issued an indictment against Wilson on 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder. He was also charged with 1 count each of battery, carjacking, breaking and entering, and burglary. Prosecutor Fox expressed hope that the conviction would bring some comfort to the victims' families. The next day, Wade made his initial court appearance on these charges via video link. The judge read the charges and decided to hold Wilson in custody without bail. Wilson was also ordered to have no contact with Melissa Lynn Montes. Since his arrest in the early hours of October 8, 2019, Wade has been held without bail. His trial faced numerous delays over the following years due to frequent postponements and pretrial motions. During this period, Wade underwent some personal changes, including the addition of numerous tattoos on his face, including Nazi symbols. In response, the defense asked the court to allow the use of face makeup to hide these tattoos, arguing that they could prejudice the jury. Although the court granted this request, the defense ultimately decided not to use makeup. After Wade's alleged escape attempt, the trial was finally ready to begin. On June 10, 2024, the jury was selected and opening arguments were heard in the Florida death penalty case of Wade Wilson. Key testimonies. During the trial, several witnesses made statements that Wade had confessed to the murders of Melton and Ruiz. In fact, the defense did not dispute many of the facts in the case, but insisted on reduced responsibility, at one point claiming that he just went crazy. One of the key witnesses was Wade's biological father, Stephen Testaska. He described in detail his phone conversations with his son on the night of the murders. Testaska testified that Wade confessed to him to the murder of the 2 women, describing his actions with disturbing precision. According to Testaska, Wade described how he met Christine Melton in a bar, went to her home, and then strangled her in her sleep. As for Diana Ruiz, Wade said he saw her on the street, offered her a ride, and then strangled her in the car. When he tried to get rid of her body, he found that she was still breathing, so he ran her over several times with the car. Wade's father also spoke about his internal conflict about handing his son over to the police. He admitted that he initially wanted to help his son, but ultimately decided that it would be wrong, especially given the brutality of the crimes. Melissa Montanez, Wade's ex-girlfriend, also gave important testimony. She described in detail Wade's attack on her on the morning of October 7th, and also described his confession to the murders, which he made by phone from prison. Wilson's defense tried to argue that he was a mentally ill drug addict who was incapable of taking responsibility for his actions. They asked that Wilson be found guilty only of second-degree manslaughter and given a chance for rehabilitation. Prosecutors, on the other hand, emphasized that Wilson killed for the sake of killing, enjoying the death throes of the victims. In their view, the crimes were the height of a cynical disregard for life and a manifestation of a deep hatred of women. This was evidenced by his bragging about executions, detailed descriptions of the agony of the strangled, and the mockery of mutilated bodies. Prosecutors argued that Wilson would continue to kill if he was not stopped. The defendant himself refused to testify or apologize to the victims' families. After about 2 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Wade Wilson was found guilty on all charges, including 2 counts of premeditated murder. The courtroom was filled with cheers as Christine and Diana's relatives hugged each other, rejoicing in the long-awaited justice. Only Wilson stood still, although tears treacherously shone in his eyes. He was facing the most severe punishment, the death penalty. Indeed, a week after the verdict, the jury convened to determine the killer's fate. This time the session was short. The majority of the jury agreed that Wade Wilson deserved the ultimate punishment. According to the new laws, the decision did not have to be unanimous. 8 votes out of 12 were enough. The judge only had to approve the verdict, and Wilson was given a lethal injection. This verdict was the culmination of a long and complicated trial that lasted for 5 years with interruptions. Sessions were postponed due to COVID-related restrictions, changes in the defendant's lawyers, and even the death of one of them. Wilson was constantly denied absurd requests for bail or dismissal of the case. The brazen killer even tried to escape from prison through a window with his cellmate. During this time, Wilson managed to get numerous tattoos on his face. The defense asked for permission to hide these decorations with makeup so as not to shock the jury, but the client proudly refused to do so. This verdict was the conclusion of a tragic story that deeply affected the lives of many people and shook the entire Cape Coral and Fort Myers community. The deaths of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz at the hands of Wade Wilson came as a real shock to their families and the entire Cape Coral community. The senseless and cruel deaths of 2 bright women, mothers, friends, and colleagues, took a piece of the soul from everyone who knew and loved them. Their flourishing lives were cut short in an instant, leaving behind indescribable pain and emptiness. Stephanie, Christine's best friend, could not forgive herself for bringing a psychopathic killer into their circle. She constantly wondered what would have happened if she had acted differently that fateful night. Could she have saved Kristen if she had been more careful? These pangs of conscience tormented the girl every day, overshadowing the bright memories of their friendship. Kristen's relatives, mother, brother, sister, did not even have the opportunity to say goodbye to her until they identified her mutilated body in the morgue. They begged the heavens for a miracle, hoping that there had been some kind of mistake. But the terrible truth was soon confirmed. Christine was gone. She died a horrible death at the hands of a monster she had recklessly trusted. Their lives were divided into before and after, and their hearts were forever filled with sadness, anger, and emptiness. Diana Ruiz's family suffered an even worse fate. For 4 days, they did not know whether their beloved mother, daughter, fiancé, and sister were alive. They called hospitals, morgues, and police stations hundreds of times, hoping for a miracle. But when their hope faded, they had to accept the worst. Diana died a martyr's death at the hands of an inhuman. Diana's fiancé almost went mad with grief. He blamed himself for not taking his beloved to work that tragic morning. Now the man could only visit her grave every day and cry bitterly, remembering their happy moments. Diana's son could barely talk about his mother. Every word came with incredible effort. Each memory tore the wound in his heart again and again. The only consolation for the grieving families was that the murderer of their loved ones would be punished with the most severe punishment. This will not bring the dead back, but it will at least quench the thirst for justice and protect others from the fate of Wilson's victims. The murders of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz have had a profound impact on the entire Cape Coral and Fort Myers community. These crimes disrupted the sense of safety and peace that had previously prevailed in these cities. Christine was known as a real ray of sunshine that warmed everyone around her. She was an active member of the community, working as a waitress at Duffy's Bar, where she interacted with many people on a daily basis. Her loss has left a void in the hearts of not only her family and friends, but also her many customers and co-workers. Diana was a beloved bartender at the Moose Lodge Club, where she worked for the past 5 years. Her co-workers and customers fondly remembered her friendliness, wit, and ability to get along with everyone. The loss of Diana was especially painful for the members of the club, where she was an integral part of the team. These murders made many residents reconsider their attitude to safety. People became more cautious, especially women, who were now afraid to go to work alone or trust strangers. Local bars and restaurants where Kristen and Diana worked organized memorial and fundraising events to support their families. These events showed how closely connected the community was and how deeply it was affected by this tragedy. Wade Wilson's case also brought attention to the issue of domestic violence and the importance of responding to the first signs of aggressive behavior. Many in the community have reflected on how this tragedy could have been prevented if more attention had been paid to Wilson's early signs of violence. Local authorities and law enforcement increased security measures and conducted a series of awareness campaigns to prevent violence. This tragedy has spurred a more active discussion of community safety issues and the search for ways to prevent similar crimes in the future. The case of Wade Wilson is a vivid example of how one person can cause untold pain and suffering to many others. His actions not only took the lives of 2 innocent women, Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz, but also forever changed the lives of their families, friends, and the entire Cape Coral and Fort Myers community. The timeline of events in October 2019 shows how quickly a situation can spiral out of control when a person with a history of violence and drug abuse is released. Wilson, who had a long history of delinquency and violent behavior, committed 2 murders and a brutal attack on his ex-girlfriend in a few days. The investigation and trial highlighted not only the gruesome details of Wilson's crimes, but also showed how important cooperation between different law enforcement agencies and the public is in solving such complex cases. A key role in Wilson's capture was played by his biological father, who, despite his personal feelings, made the difficult decision to inform the police of his son's whereabouts. The court's verdict, the death penalty for Wade Wilson, was the culmination of a long and emotionally draining process for all parties involved. While this decision cannot restore the lives lost or heal the wounds inflicted on the victims' families, it at least provides a measure of justice and prevents Wilson from harming others in the future. The case also raised important questions about the criminal justice system, drug treatment, and domestic violence prevention. Wilson's story is one of repeated offenses and escalating violence that ultimately led to tragic consequences. It highlights the need for more effective methods of rehabilitating offenders and early intervention in cases of domestic violence. For the Cape Coral and Fort Myers communities, this tragedy was a painful reminder of the fragility of human life and the importance of vigilance and mutual support. It has prompted a reassessment of security measures and increased efforts to prevent violence in society. The lives of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz, although tragically cut short, left a deep mark on the hearts of those who knew them. Their stories remind us of the value of every human life and how important it is to value and protect our loved ones. Ultimately, the case of Wade Wilson serves as a stark reminder of the dark side of human nature and the importance of being vigilant and responsible members of society. It underscores the need to continually work toward a safer and more just society for all.